In the stillness of your soul, when the world feels heavy and uncertain, have you ever sensed a quiet voice, soft but undeniable? That whisper, subtle yet profound, is the voice of God calling to His chosen ones. It is not a random thought or fleeting feeling. It is a divine signal, a sacred invitation to step away from the familiar and embark on a journey of transformation. This is not a call to fear, but a call to trust, a call to rise and follow the path He has designed uniquely for you. God does not speak to His chosen through thunderous declarations, but through whispers, reaching the depths of our hearts where doubt and hope collide. These moments of divine connection are powerful reminders that you are set apart for something greater. You are not here by chance, but by purpose, chosen to move beyond the ordinary into a life of meaning and fulfillment. Today, we'll explore how to recognize and respond to God's whisper, a transformative nudge that can change the course of your life. If you've ever felt restless, searching for a deeper purpose, this message is for you. Stay with us, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to join a community of believers seeking God's divine guidance together. Hearing God's whisper, the call to leave. God's voice often comes not in a roar but in a whisper, gentle, persistent, and transformative. For His chosen ones, this whisper carries a profound message. It is time to leave the comfort of what you know and step into the unknown. It is not merely a call to move physically, but a spiritual summons to align your life more deeply with His divine purpose. This call is not meant to overwhelm, but to awaken. A sacred stirring that reminds you that you are set apart for something far greater than you've imagined. In those quiet moments, you may feel a nudge in your spirit, a restlessness you can't quite explain. Perhaps it begins as a vague sense that where you are no longer fulfills you, that the routines and patterns of your life seem insufficient. This is not dissatisfaction, but preparation. God's whisper is often a sign that He is about to shift your season, opening doors to new opportunities, new growth, and new victories. This spiritual nudge might come during times of hardship, moments when you feel lost, weighed down by challenges, or questioning your path. Yet, it is in these moments of vulnerability that God's whisper resonates the loudest. He knows your heart, your struggles, and your potential. His call is not to condemn you for your fears, but to draw you closer to His plan, gently guiding you toward the purpose He has prepared for you. The whisper is deeply personal, tailored to your journey. For some, it may be an unexpected encounter, a conversation with a stranger that ignites a long-buried dream. For others, it might be a scripture verse that suddenly feels alive, speaking directly to their situation. These moments are not coincidences, but divine appointments, reminders that God is orchestrating every detail of your life to prepare you for what lies ahead. God's call to leave is not about abandoning responsibility or acting impulsively. Instead, it is about stepping away from what no longer serves His purpose in your life. It could be a toxic environment, a draining relationship, or even an internal pattern of fear and self-doubt. He calls you to let go, to trust that His plans for you are good, and to embrace the path He has laid out with faith and courage. When you hear this whisper, it is the beginning of a spiritual evolution. It marks the start of a journey where you grow in faith, trust, and obedience. Leaving behind the familiar is not easy, but it is necessary. God's chosen are not meant to remain stagnant. They are called to evolve, to walk boldly into the unknown with the assurance that He goes before them, making a way where there seems to be none. As you reflect, ask yourself, have you felt this whisper in your soul? Have you sensed the call to leave behind the old and step into the new? If so, take heart. God's whisper is not just a call to action. It is a promise of transformation, a sign that you are about to embark on a journey that will bring you closer to Him and the extraordinary life He has planned for you. The challenge of leaving the familiar. Stepping away from the familiar is one of the most profound challenges God's chosen ones face. When He whispers, urging us to leave the comfort of our routines, environments, or even relationships, it often feels unsettling. The familiar, though it may no longer serve His purpose, is comfortable. It feels safe. Yet God's call is never about staying where it's easy. It's about stepping into the unknown and trusting Him to guide us toward His greater plan. The first struggle often begins within. It's natural to feel a deep attachment to the life you've built, even if that life feels incomplete or unsatisfying. Old habits, routines, and relationships can create a false sense of security, making it hard to imagine a different way of being. Fear creeps in, whispering doubts. What if I fail? What if I'm not strong enough to handle what lies ahead? These inner battles are where the real struggle begins. The familiar is like an anchor, holding you in place, even as your soul longs to move forward. Then there's the emotional weight of leaving. Relationships, in particular, can be a source of deep conflict. Not everyone in your life is meant to accompany you on the journey God has planned. Some relationships may hold you back, rooted in patterns that no longer align with your spiritual growth. This realization is painful, as it may involve distancing yourself from people you care about, or those who have been a significant part of your life. But God's purpose often requires pruning, removing what no longer serves you, so that new growth can occur. As hard as it is, letting go is a crucial step towards stepping into His divine plan. It's important to remember that leaving the familiar doesn't always mean a physical departure. Sometimes it's about releasing internal limitations, fears, doubts, or old ways of thinking that keep you trapped. You might be called to abandon habits that no longer align with God's vision for your life. For example, clinging to a mindset of scarcity or self-doubt can prevent you from embracing the abundance He has prepared for you. In these moments, God's whisper challenges you to trust Him fully, to let go of the old so that He can usher in the new. The spiritual struggle lies in surrendering control. The familiar gives us the illusion of predictability, but stepping into the unknown requires faith, a deep and unwavering trust in God's timing and plan. It's not easy to walk away from what you've always known without seeing the full picture of where you're going. Yet this is where spiritual growth happens. When you take that leap of faith, you demonstrate your belief in God's promise, that He has plans to prosper you, not to harm you, to give you hope and a future. Jeremiah 29:11. God does not ask us to leave the familiar without a purpose. He calls us out of our comfort zones because staying stagnant is never part of His plan for His chosen ones. Just as He called Abraham to leave his homeland for an unknown destination, God calls each of us to trust Him enough to move forward, even when the path ahead is unclear. Abraham's obedience led to blessings beyond measure, and so too will your obedience open doors you never imagined. In the process of leaving, you may feel isolated or misunderstood by those around you. Not everyone will understand your journey, and that's okay. God's purpose for you is unique, and the path He has laid out may not make sense to others. But remember, you are not walking this journey alone. God promises to go before you, to walk beside you, and to strengthen you when the way feels uncertain. As you face the challenge of leaving the familiar, take heart in knowing that every step forward is a step closer to the life God has prepared for you. The struggle is real, but so is the transformation that comes with obedience. When you trust God enough to let go of what no longer aligns with His purpose, you make room for Him to work miracles in your life. And as you step out in faith, you'll find that what lies ahead is not just different. It is abundantly better, filled with His grace, purpose, and promise. God's plan for growth and purpose. God's plans for His chosen ones are never random. They are deliberate, purposeful, and always designed with growth in mind. When He whispers to you, nudging you toward something new, it's because He has prepared a season of transformation that aligns with His divine purpose for your life. But this preparation is not always easy to recognize. Often, it comes disguised in challenges, restlessness, or even moments of despair. These are not signs of abandonment, but evidence that God is at work, refining and equipping you for what lies ahead. Growth rarely happens in comfort. God knows this, and He allows challenges to shape His chosen ones. Perhaps you've faced seasons where everything felt uncertain, relationships faltered, careers shifted, or unexpected hardships arose. In those moments, it's tempting to feel forgotten or to question God's plan. But these trials are not punishments. They are tools of preparation. Like a gardener pruning a tree, God removes what is unnecessary in your life so that you can bear fruit in the seasons to come. Take, for example, the story of Joseph. Betrayed by his brothers and sold into slavery, Joseph could have easily succumbed to despair. Yet every trial he faced, whether it was imprisonment or betrayal, was a step in God's plan to position him for greatness. Joseph's hardships refined his character, strengthened his faith, and ultimately prepared him to rise as a leader who would save nations. What appeared to be a series of misfortunes was, in reality, God's way of preparing Joseph for a purpose far greater than he could have imagined. Similarly, restlessness is often a sign of divine preparation. Have you ever felt an unshakable sense that you were made for more, even when everything in your life seemed fine on the surface? That restlessness is God stirring your spirit, preparing you to step into a new season of growth. It is His way of gently pushing you out of complacency and into alignment with His will. This stirring may feel uncomfortable, but it is a sign that God is calling you to grow, to evolve, and to step into the fullness of your purpose. God's preparation also involves teaching His chosen ones to trust Him completely. Trust grows in the waiting, in those seasons where the next step isn't clear, and you are asked to rely on faith rather than sight. Consider the Israelites wandering in the wilderness. For 40 years they faced challenges that tested their faith and patience. Yet through it all, God was preparing them for the promised land. He provided manna when they were hungry, water when they were thirsty, and guidance through the cloud by day and fire by night. Every step of their journey, though difficult, was part of His plan to grow their trust and dependence on Him. In your own life, God may be using challenges and restlessness to prepare you for something extraordinary. The job loss that feels devastating may be God's way of leading you to a career that aligns more closely with your purpose. The relationship that ended may be His way of removing someone who was not meant to journey with you into your next season. The restlessness in your heart may be His way of saying, "It's time to move forward." Preparation also involves equipping you with the skills, wisdom, and resilience you'll need for the journey ahead. Just as David spent years tending sheep before he faced Goliath, God uses your current circumstances to prepare you for what's next. Those seemingly mundane tasks, those moments of waiting, and even those setbacks are part of His divine process. Nothing in your life is wasted when you are walking in alignment with God's plan. As you face challenges or wrestle with restlessness, remember that these are signs of God's active presence in your life. He is preparing you not just for change, but for growth. His plan is always to prosper you, to bring you closer to the purpose for which He created you. Trust the process, even when it's difficult. Know that the God who calls you is the same God who equips and sustains you. With each step of obedience, you are moving closer to the extraordinary purpose He has designed uniquely for you. Faith and courage in uncertainty. Stepping into the unknown is one of the greatest tests of faith, yet it is in these moments of uncertainty that God often does His most transformative work. Faith at its core is trusting in what we cannot see, believing in God's promises even when the path ahead seems clouded. Courage, meanwhile, is the willingness to take that first step despite the fear and doubt that try to hold us back. Together, faith and courage become the bridge that carries us from where we are to where God wants us to be. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast, dark ocean with no visible way forward. The waves are turbulent, and the horizon is hidden by mist. God's whisper comes in this moment, urging you to step into the water, promising that the way will be made clear. Like Peter stepping out of the boat to walk on water, you may feel the initial surge of fear. The ground beneath you seems unsteady, and your heart questions whether you can really trust God's call. Yet faith requires you to keep your eyes fixed on Him, not on the waves. Courage is what moves your feet forward. Faith is not blind optimism. It is rooted in the character of God. He is faithful, trustworthy, and always working for the good of those who love Him. Even when the path ahead feels uncertain, His timing and plan are perfect. Think of the story of Esther. When faced with the daunting task of approaching the king to save her people, she could have let fear paralyze her. Instead, Esther displayed extraordinary faith and courage, trusting that God had placed her in that position for such a time as this. Esther 4:14. Her willingness to act despite her uncertainty became the turning point for an entire nation. God often calls His chosen ones to act before all the details are clear. This is not to test us unnecessarily, but to strengthen our reliance on Him. Abraham, called to leave his homeland for an unknown destination, obeyed without hesitation. He stepped into the unknown, guided only by God's promise. His journey is a powerful reminder that faith is about trusting in God's provision, even when we don't see the full picture. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to trust God in spite of it. When God calls you to step out, fear will inevitably try to hold you back. Doubts will whisper, "What if you fail? What if you've misunderstood?" But courage answers, "Even if I don't know how this will work out, I trust that God does." The truth is, God's plans often require us to walk through seasons of uncertainty. These moments are not meant to weaken us, but to build our character and deepen our faith. Like a seed planted in the soil, growth happens in the unseen. We may not understand how or when the fruit will appear, but we trust that God is working beneath the surface, preparing us for the harvest. Faith and courage are inseparable companions on this journey. Faith keeps us grounded in God's promises, while courage propels us forward into His plan. Together, they enable us to embrace the unknown with confidence, knowing that the one who calls us is faithful to complete the work He has begun. So when God whispers, "Step out," take that first step with faith in your heart and courage in your spirit. The path may not always be clear, but His presence will guide you every step of the way. Biblical examples of divine calling. The Bible is rich with stories of God calling His chosen ones in unique and often unexpected ways. These examples not only reveal God's divine purpose, but also serve as timeless lessons for modern-day believers navigating their own spiritual journeys. Each story demonstrates that God's call requires faith, courage, and obedience, even when the path ahead seems unclear. One of the most well-known examples is the story of Moses. God called Moses from a burning bush, an extraordinary and unmistakable sign of his presence. Exodus 3:1-12. Moses, who had been living a quiet life as a shepherd, was suddenly tasked with leading the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. Overwhelmed by doubt, Moses questioned his ability to fulfill such a monumental mission. Yet, God reassured him, saying, "I will be with you." Exodus 3:12. This story reminds us that God often calls us to tasks beyond what we think we are capable of, not because of our strength, but because of His power working through us. In modern times, this could look like being called to a new career, ministry, or leadership role that feels intimidating, but trusting that God equips those He calls. Similarly, the story of Samuel shows how God's call can come when we least expect it. As a young boy serving in the temple, Samuel heard God's voice in the night, calling him by name. 1 Samuel 3:1-10. At first, Samuel didn't recognize that it was God speaking to him, but with guidance from Eli, he responded, "Speak, for your servant is listening." 1 Samuel 3:10. Samuel's story illustrates the importance of being attentive and open to God's voice, even in the ordinary moments of life. Today, God may speak through prayer, scripture, or the wise counsel of others. Like Samuel, we must have the humility and willingness to listen and respond. The story of Esther offers another powerful example of divine calling. Though she was an orphan and initially lived in obscurity, Esther was chosen by God to become queen and play a pivotal role in saving her people from destruction. When faced with the risk of approaching the king uninvited, Esther initially hesitated, but her cousin Mordecai reminded her that she had been placed in her position for such a time as this. Esther 4:14. Her courage to embrace her calling saved an entire nation. Esther's story resonates with those who feel unworthy or unsure of their purpose, reminding us that God's plans often place us in unexpected positions of influence. Even Jesus' disciples provide an example of God's calling. Fishermen like Peter, James, and John were called to leave their nets and follow Jesus, becoming fishers of men. Matthew 4:19. Their response was immediate and wholehearted, showing that answering God's call often involves leaving behind what is familiar to embrace something far greater. For modern believers, this might mean stepping away from comfortable routines to follow God's call into new opportunities or deeper spiritual growth. These biblical examples reveal a common theme. God's call is always purposeful, often disruptive, and ultimately transformative. Just as He called Moses, Samuel, Esther, and the disciples, He continues to call His chosen ones today. His call may not always come through burning bushes or audible voices, but it comes through the nudges in our hearts, the opportunities before us, and the circumstances that push us toward change. The question is not whether God is calling, but whether we are ready to listen, trust, and obey. When we do, we step into a journey of faith that leads to a life filled with His purpose and glory. Embracing God's transformative whisper. As we conclude, take a moment to reflect on your own journey. Have you heard God's whisper, urging you toward something greater? His call is never random. It is a divine invitation to grow, to trust, and to step boldly into the purpose He has designed for you. Remember, faith opens the door, courage moves you forward, and obedience brings His plans to life. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to join a community of believers walking this path together. Let's continue seeking God's voice and His extraordinary plans for our lives.